Women do not belong in combat. I say this as a woman and a soldier.
Counterpoint. Nobody belongs in combat. War is stupid. Today, we've got good old PragerU on the docket, and of course, we're going to be talking about women in combat. Now, as somebody who is very anti-war, I do not see very many reasons for us to throw American citizens or damn near anybody on the front lines to die. I am a person who comes from a military family, so my perspective from this may be a little unique. So this is Michelle Thibault, or Thibault? The Bew? I don't know how to pronounce your name. I apologize. She's a woman who's been going on a campaign for a while now to keep women out of the United States military. Now, why would you want women out of the United States military? For PragerU, there are a couple of reasons. One, they are advocates for traditional gender roles, and in those roles, women are not combat specialists. They are people who get pregnant and raise children. That's basically the job of women in society for PragerU. And as much as I do not want to advocate for anybody joining the military because, well, that is a role that can get you killed, I will say that for many people, it is a very, very guaranteed way to get financially emancipated. Now, emancipation normally means somebody gaining independence from another, and that's basically what I'm arguing for here. There are a lot of different ways that people get completely bound to their circumstances, and finances are the thing that prevent them from being able to move forward with their lives in any meaningful way. The United States military, for all of its faults, is a damn near guaranteed way to get out of several financial burdens. It is a guarantee that you will be able to afford college. It's a guarantee that you'll be able to afford healthcare. It's a guarantee that you'll be able to afford housing, assuming that you and the VA are going to be able to make ends meet in that particular argument later on down the road. But for people who are currently in the service, it is a way to guarantee all those things while you're in the service. And then, of course, if you can stay long enough to get retirement, then you can start stacking the retirement benefits of the military on top of your civilian paycheck, and you can make a pretty damn good living. Now, as for why Michelle doesn't want people who are women in the military, that's something we'll get into in the video. But as for why PragerU does not want women in the military, it's a combination of them wanting traditional gender roles to be enforced, and I do mean enforced, and one of the ways you can enforce those traditional gender roles where women are not providers but are instead caregivers is by removing their options to get money, removing the guaranteed option for them to get college education, removing the guaranteed option for them to get healthcare, basically leaving them with the corporate ladder, which is incredibly unstable, or having a husband that takes care of everything, and that being their main source of survivability. After all, PragerU is ran by Dennis Prager, who said that when his wife was a waitress in her mid-teens, her manager grabbed her breasts and squeezed them on numerous occasions. And apparently his version of empowerment was trying to find convenient places within the job where she couldn't be caught alone with him, being worried that at any point a person would try to molest you is female empowerment in the mind of Dennis Prager. So, trust me when I say this, Dennis Prager does not want women to have rights. He prefers a world where women are scared and are subservient. Because, again, he said as much about that being what empowerment is in regards to his fucking wife. Before we go any further, I have a quick ask for you. If you value honest and fair political analysis that makes politics a little less miserable, then please do me a huge favor. Not only subscribe to my channel, but I would also like you to tell at least 3 friends what I'm doing over here. Please and thank you.
I've seen war firsthand in all its ugliness and brutality. In 2017, I served in the U.S. Army Special Operations Command in Afghanistan. My job was to engage with local women, something my male colleagues were discouraged from doing because of religious and cultural barriers. That access was critical to our mission. I saw up close what our warfighters had to do to succeed, to survive, and to protect civilians. I was as close to combat as you could get, and thank God I didn't get any closer.
So you were as close to combat as you could get, but you weren't engaged in combat? Is that what you're trying to say? Because that seems to be what you're trying to say to me right now. Also, you did just say that you literally had a job that could only have been done by women, and that was critical to the success of the United States. So I'm sure that's going to be a point you try to undermine later. Let's see.
And thank God I didn't get any closer. I'm proud of my military service. There are many roles in the armed forces that women can and should fill, but combat is not one of them.
Ah, I see how you're trying to spin this. You had a unique role that only a woman could do, and therefore you should not have been put into a combat situation ever. So I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. I don't think women should be in combat, but I also don't think men should be in combat. Leave that to the non-binaries. I'm kidding. I don't think anybody should be in combat in the military. I do not see a reason, generally speaking, for us to kill our fellow human beings. I think war is just uniquely stupid among human beings. And I know there are plenty of animals across the animal kingdom who engage in forms of warfare. If you've ever seen rival ant colonies go against each other, then you know that war is not a uniquely human trait. But we do have the greatest capacity for killing each other. And again, I find that to be uniquely human and uniquely stupid. But if we are in a position where somebody has to go to the front lines and somebody has to be able to lay down their life, why does it have to be men? What about my biology predisposes me to taking a bullet better than you?
Until recently, it was conventional wisdom not to put women on the front lines. The principle that combat is a male burden has been nearly universal across civilizations.
The appeal to tradition fallacy is a fallacy where somebody uses the historical preference of a people as evidence that that historical preference is correct. It is a form of circular reasoning. This thing is correct because we once believed it to be so. We no longer believe it to be so, but it was correct because the ancestors believed it to be so. Saying that this is something that was traditionally done or the way it's always been done is not actually a reason for anything. It's the absence of a reason that is being hoisted up higher on the value pole because we have predispositions about our elders and the people that came before us being wiser than we are currently. This is the exactly fallacious claim that she made. It was once conventional wisdom that you didn't put women on the front lines, and yet we now go against that conventional wisdom. Would you like to know why? Because the way we engage in warfare right now does not give a shit about gender. If you're on the front lines and you're wielding a gun or you're holding 100 pounds of gear, if you can hold 100 pounds of gear and shoot a gun, then you are a able soldier. If you can follow orders, then you're an able soldier. And there is nothing about being a woman that says that you can't carry 100 pounds of gear and shoot a gun.
But, Suris, women are physically weaker than men.
And they shoot a gun.
Well, yes, but...
Can they carry the gear?
Well, yes, but...
Do you just want to see more men die?
No, I just really like women.
Yeah, but if somebody's qualified for a position, isn't the gender just arbitrary?
They're gonna draw weird porn of you about this.
Not that kind of position, and literally nothing I do at this point can stop that.
There's an obvious reason for this. Men are, on average, stronger, faster, and more capable of delivering and withstanding extreme violence.
Yeah, sorry, as the weird fan art version of me has already explained, it doesn't really matter. Men, on average, can be physically stronger than women, but guns are equalizers. Yes, they're physically stronger, but they're firing guns. They will be fine. If you can carry the gear, shoot the gun, and are otherwise qualified for the position, then we can all handle this. Nothing that you say is going to convince me that if there's a situation where you need to fight and I need to fight, that I uniquely need to die first. If we're going to be stuck in the military together, then this should be a burden that all of us share as comrades.
That's not a stereotype. It's basic physiology. And common sense tells us a society that places women, the bearers of new life on the front lines is not prioritizing its future.
Yet another set of fallacious statements from her. So you do realize that not all women will be put on the front lines in combat. There are still plenty of women who are going to be required in operator roles that are not going to be out there with the machine guns. There's plenty of women who are going to be pilots. There are plenty of women who are going to be load sergeants. There are plenty of women who are going to be in other roles in the military, even if some of them are in combat. Also, just by the way, this is ignoring the fact that there are several women who simply won't be in the military. There's plenty of women who just aren't cut out for combat, period, and therefore would not see combat, period. Also, any argument that has to say it's just common sense isn't actually an argument. If you care to do any research, you can actually find that common sense is widely noted to be a tool for quick judgment, but not actual reasoned thinking. It's the kind of thing that you use for knee-jerk reactions. It's not the kind of thing you use when you're trying to come to a reasoned, thoughtful position. It's common sense that the rustling in the bushes behind you could be a predator, because that's the knee-jerk reaction. The reasoned position is it could be anything, but your survival instinct says that it could be something that could harm you, and in a knee-jerk situation, that could be great for your survival, even if you're wrong. There's even some prolific thinkers that believe that common sense is just the collection of prejudices that were acquired before you hit age 18. And while this is not entirely true, because there's plenty of ways that people's common sense gets muddied and modified over the years, the sense is basically still the same. Common sense is whatever prejudices you walked in to this conversation with. It doesn't mean that they are correct. It doesn't mean that they are more accurate than anything. They are just that. They are a handful of prejudices. Some of them could be correct, and some of them could be wrong. And, even more dangerous, some of them can be situationally correct, but contextually incorrect. A rule of thumb is that if anybody uses common sense as part of their argument, they're trying to sell you something because they're hoping that your preconceived biases line up with theirs at least a little bit. Also, her point about a country not caring about its future if it sends women to the front lines, again, it doesn't make any sense if you think of the fact that we have women that would still be staying behind and would still be having plenty of babies.
Yet, in 2015, the Obama administration ordered the full integration of women into all military combat roles, including special operations and mixed-gender infantry units. At the time, many of us in uniform knew this was a mistake, and we had the data to prove it. A U.S. Marine Corps study that same year found that all male units outperformed mixed-gender units in nearly every measurable category. Mixed units had slower times in obstacle courses. Women were 6 times more likely to suffer musculoskeletal injuries than men. Women took longer to evacuate wounded comrades to safety, where male Marines could do single-person lifts. Female Marines often had to revert to 2-person drags, which were slower and less efficient. In war, those gaps aren't theoretical, they're fatal.
So she's actually correct that the United States military did have a report in 2015 that said that there were very bad performances from mixed gender units. But from what I've been able to tell, there are actually contradicting results from similar studies in European countries. And most of this comes down to the fact that in the United States, we have a different set of combat readiness standards for women in the military. So if you take women who have been engaging in a different set of fitness standards and have them in the same unit as men who have had a higher level of fitness standards applied to them, then you are going to get those results. But those are the exact results you would get from having men with different levels of fitness standards applied to them in the same unit. It would be the exact same thing. And while, yes, we actually do have some British studies along with the American studies that show that women performed comparatively worse with physically demanding tasks, other studies from other militaries in European countries have contradicted these results, showing that many female soldiers actually outperformed their male counterparts on the same physical tests. The one notation seems to be, again, the gaps are in the training regimens. If the training regimens for anybody are less physically demanding than the training regimens of anybody else, the end result is going to be that the people with the more strict training regimens are going to perform better, regardless of gender. So while, yes, we do have studies showing that women perform worse in these physical areas and worse when it comes to hitting targets with guns, any study conducted in a United States military where we have a different set of training practices for women and different expectations for those women in training is always going to have those results, poisoning the well from the beginning.
They're fatal. Military experts, including those in the Israeli Defense Forces, have identified additional concerns. In mixed-gender combat units, the Israelis found male soldiers often shifted focus away from the mission to protect their female comrades, their natural instinct, even if it risked compromising mission goals. And there's another obvious problem. As Anna Simons, professor of defense analysis at the Naval Postgraduate School, observes, men and women have been each other's most consistent distraction since the beginning of time. To pretend that we don't know what will happen when men and women are thrown together for prolonged periods in emotionally intense situations defies common sense.
There's that word again, common sense. Now, again, I agree. Understanding what's going to happen when you put people, especially younger people, as happens to be the case with most military personnel, in a single area where their emotions are going to be driven high, they are very likely to engage in some behaviors that could be considered extra military, as it were. But I don't really see the difference between this and having a couple of personnel in your squad who happen to be gay. Like, if some people in your squad fuck each other, who gives a shit? Hell, we even have myths about various other cultures that involve them having sex as men together to increase group cohesion, because the group that were fucking each other were more likely to do everything in their power to protect each other and get the mission done right. But it's really weird to me to hear somebody say that one of the negatives of this is that military personnel might try to protect other military personnel while on the front lines. I completely understand if you think the mission is more important than the lives of your individual soldiers, but from my perspective, as somebody who sees himself as a little more humanitarian than PragerU, I would see that a military that prioritizes protecting each other to be a very good military indeed. After all, wouldn't you want that from your comrades in arms, for them to, not abandon you, to actually try to keep you safe, like on the battlefield?
Preparing for battle, and battle itself, is stressful enough. Why would we want to introduce sexual tension into the mix? Not to mention the strainless places on supervising officers who now have to deal with the sexual dynamics in addition to their traditional responsibilities. Does this sound like a strategy for mission success? But all these warnings were ignored. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta famously said, "If women can meet the qualifications for the job, then they should have the right to serve." But when women couldn't meet those standards, the response wasn't to rethink the policy, it was to lower the standards. When 2 women graduated Ranger School in 2015, it was only after multiple attempts and what military insiders described as unusual command interest.
So again, this is kind of par for the course for what PragerU does. It may or may not be the case that there was unusual interest from the higher-ups in graduating 2 women out of Ranger School, but that's kind of a smoke and mirrors game, because ultimately it doesn't matter whether or not that's true. That's an individual case, and individual cases can slip through the cracks in any system damn near all the time. It's not actually representative of any data. Their previous attempt of using the 2015 Marine study is a far more compelling argument, even though that study is contradicted by studies in other countries. It's at the very least a study that makes more sense. But again, even she notes in here that standards were lowered for military personnel who were female. And again, if you lower those standards for females in the military, you lower the standards for their training regimen, you of course are going to get the results that the 2015 study showed. Almost as if when you take all the information that PragerU is willing to throw at the table, they contradict themselves.
At West Point, physical tests have employed gender-adjusted thresholds. In the Army physical fitness test, male soldiers had to perform 84 push-ups in 2 minutes. Women, just 42. That's not equality. That's a compromise with reality that war will never make.
So I kind of agree, but there are plenty of positions in the military that do not require you to be as physically fit as others. So if we are going to have women in the military and they are going to be in those positions, then having a different training regimen makes sense. That said, if we are going to have women in combat roles, then their training regimen should be identical to that of the males. It's, again, almost as if when you take your exact words about how the training regimens are different across the genders, you would naturally see the end result of mixed gender groups performing worse and performing slower, because you have a group of people who were quite literally not trained as well as another group of people mixed together trying to outperform other groups. Yes, these can be problematic on a battlefield. I'm not going to deny that. But the answer to that would be to raise the standards that women are trained with in the United States military so that they can then meet these other standards that they apparently are not meeting right now. That seems to be the way that this was handled in other countries that had contradictory studies to our own. So we should see those exact same results if the training regimens are identical, or at the very least, the margin for error should be somewhere reasonable.
The Pentagon, under President Obama, and then even more so under President Biden, prioritized ideology over effectiveness. The military, whose only purpose is to fight and win wars, was turned into a social laboratory. Valor knows no gender, Obama said. Maybe so, but strength, speed, and lethality do. In November 2024, when Pete Hegseth was nominated for Secretary of Defense, the issue returned to the spotlight. Critics attacked Hegseth for saying, "We should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated." He's right, and deep down, everyone knows it.
So, a couple of things. Again, this is that appeal to common sense. The truth is written on your heart, and deep down you know it. No, the fuck it's not. The truth is bared out in data and studies and analytics. The truth is not bared out by what's written on your own heart. Also, I love that the statement that Biden and Obama ran the military not as an effective fighting force, despite the fact that they both happened to be leaders during when we were in wartime, but the argument is that they ran the military as a social experiment of ideology, but zero evidence is given towards that in the PragerU video. It's a statement that is made, and the hope is that you, with your, let's say the word again, common sense, will agree with PragerU. As for Pete Hegseth, so this is where I like having the perspective from being in a military family, because the first thing I'm going to do is look up what other veterans have to say about Pegseth? Once again, weird porn of it. And once again, there is not a damn thing I can do about any of that. Apparently, in the military, Pete Hegseth was an infantry officer. And apparently he did not complete Ranger School, Airborne School, or Air Assault School, which are all things that people in that position in the military would usually have completed. He was then apparently tasked with being in civil affairs. And apparently within the United States military, civil affairs is considered the Mickey Mouse course of a college, effectively. It's a nothing position for people who aren't going to get promoted. The people who are there tend to be the lowest performers, but those of you who are in the military or have been in the military, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going off of just stuff that I am reading from people's opinions who have served. Hegseth's storied career then has him volunteering to be an instructor at the Coin Academy in Kabul, where he taught exactly one class. So he's a person who has served in the military, but has served in one of the cushiest versions of the military you ever could have served in. And then once he became a civvy, he ended up moving to Fox News and ended up being one of the regulars on their weekend morning shows. There's a pretty extensive thread on him in r/military, and you know what? I think it's a very interesting read on how other military veterans basically see him as a standard for puddling mediocrity. There's nothing in there I would personally hang my hat on, though, because it's an area that I don't have personal experience in, and again, this is why I'm hoping that y'all who have military experience would chime in. But speaking of his mediocrity, we're talking about the same guy that managed to get his signal chat leaked multiple times while oversharing about United States military secrets and attack plans. This is your guy that you're putting on a pedestal for his opinions about women in combat? I'm sorry, but this guy seems like a tool who's only ever done the bare minimum to get by. I don't think he's the person I would be going to learn anything about how to increase the standards of our military.
He's right, and deep down, everyone knows it. The first job of government is to keep its citizens safe. To do that, our armed forces must be governed by biological and cultural realities, not the fictions of gender theorists.
You know that when you say the United States government needs to be using the military as a bastion of biological and cultural realities, and then you shit on gender theory, you know that the cultural reality is always shifting. Culture is nothing if not fluid. So to say that that's something that should govern our actual military and that will somehow make us more safe, seems like a nonsense statement. And again, I think it's really funny to argue that the United States military's main purpose is to keep the citizens safe when I can't think of anything that the United States military's actually kept the United States itself safe from in a very long time, outside of our ability to use soft power outside of our own country. We've used our military more as an arm for harming others and, again, extending our own soft power than it's ever been used as a method of actual defense of the United States, more defense of the United States' financial interests. But again, that is an area that I am not an expert in. And if you happen to be somebody who's in the military, maybe your perspective on that is going to be a little different. But that's pretty much everything that she has in this video. So to sum up, her arguments for why women don't belong in combat are a study that's contradicted by studies in other countries, an argument that they traditionally weren't used in armed combat, which is a fallacy, and an argument that the Biden and Obama administrations were responsible for the increase in women in our military because of some weird social experiment or lab experiment with our military without ever actually backing it up. Oh, and quoting Pete Hegseth as the end-all be-all on this actual conversation when he himself is a standard for military and United States mediocrity. I honestly expected better of PragerU. Usually, they at least throw out some compelling arguments or half-truths that are very hard to discern at a just glance. And it's one of the reasons that I didn't start doing PragerU stuff on my live streams as often, because I'd rather have the ability to do research when they give those half-truths. One of the reasons why PragerU is as successful as it is it throws half-truths out there that most people believe because of, say the word again, their common sense. And so it takes a little bit of time to pick those arguments apart. But you know what? This one, honestly, fairly easy. There were no actual good arguments given as to why women should not be allowed to fight alongside men. Again, I do not want a world where anybody in the armed forces has to engage in actual combat and actually has to be shot and killed. But if any of us are going to have to be on the front lines, then I would rather a world where equality rules and all of us have to be on the front lines, not just some of us. But also, my perspective is not from somebody who participated in the United States military. My perspective could be entirely flawed. So if you have a different perspective on this, let me know in the comments section below. But honestly, this is where I came to after doing my research into this as I was going through this. But if you value an honest and fair perspective on politics and you want to support somebody that tries to make political analysis a little less miserable, then do me a favor and subscribe to my channel and at least tell 3 friends what I'm doing over here. That would be amazing. And you could also support me on Patreon if you really, really want to get in on what I'm doing. I always make sure to have behind the scenes videos talking about what's going on the channel in the background. If you want to support what I'm doing on my other channels, I do have a secondary channel where I go over the news. That is Suris live, and I also have my Magic the Gathering channel where I talk about card games instead of all the depressing stuff that goes on in the United States right now. And if I'm super lucky, then K-Fox will have thrown all that up on screen for me right about here. So go ahead and hop in there if you want to support what I'm doing over here, and I will hopefully see y'all in the next one. As always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitt, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.